Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my mini podcast series around the very difficult and sensitive subject of trauma. We have looked at a number of things already, and today we're looking at trauma healing. So we've looked at what it is, recognizing whether we have it, and trauma bonding, which affects our relationships. And today we are moving forward into how would we heal from trauma if we had some? We've looked at the implications if we don't heal and we just kind of deny it or we suppress it. And we've looked at the very, very detrimental effect that can have on our physical health, our emotional health, the way we live our life. We may avoid certain things, we may avoid certain people, we may even avoid going out completely if it's very bad trauma. So healing is an important thing. I want to acknowledge that it's a brave thing is the first thing I want to do, is to say that actually, if you're booking to see a therapist to heal from trauma, that's a really brave thing because there are millions of people walking around out there who believe they don't need to heal. And they're the people that are in denial. They're the people that are kind of shoving it under the carpet and just getting on with life. To actually sit in a room and say, I would like to heal from this is a huge thing for anyone to do. And I always want to acknowledge the bravery of my clients, particularly in sitting in my chair and confronting some really painful things, because that takes some courage. And having been a client myself, most therapists have been clients, I understand the courage that takes. So it is brave. I also think it's necessary if you want to live your life to your full potential. It's necessary to begin that journey. So, the first thing we need to do to heal from trauma is to actually become aware of it and the impact that it might still be having on us as adults, which we don't always understand. Sometimes we think, well, that was in the past. I get a lot of clients saying to me, well, it's just the way it was, isn't it? It's just the way it was. It's just what happened. And they've never allowed themselves to come out of that mindset of actually saying, you know, it might be how it was, but it's not how it should have been, is it? It's not fair, though, is it? It's not right, though, is it? Just because that's the way it was doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it, you know, the way it should have been. Nothing about that is correct. Just because you were abused or something happened to you, we can't dismiss that as just the way it was, because that's not the way life should be. So we do actually have to start to pull down some of those barriers that we've erected around it and allow ourselves to just open the door a little bit. Because once we become aware of it, we can begin to drop the way that we've been talking about ourselves and the beliefs that we've held about ourselves. Trauma can make us do some very strange things. It can make us talk about ourselves in quite negative ways when the trauma was never our fault in the first place. But yet we're talking about ourselves in very negative ways. In my book, Critical Parenting Reframed, really looks at this and this way that we speak to ourselves. I've just got to get on with it, haven't I? Well, I shouldn't let it get to me, should I? Why not? Why not? You've been through something terrible. Why on earth should you not let it get to you? Because acknowledgement is the first step towards healing. We have to acknowledge and accept what happened to us to begin the journey of healing. And if your narrative is saying, well, I've just got to get on with it, stiff upper lip and on we go, that's a narrative you've inherited from somewhere else in your life, and it's not serving you particularly well. So once we're aware of it, we can begin to drop that self-criticism, and we can begin to drop some of those limiting beliefs. And so when we can learn compassion towards ourselves and not criticism, we can understand that what happened to us and the way we've been living as a result of that isn't actually our fault. And that's how we move towards much more self-compassion, as opposed to beating ourselves over the head with a stick. You should try harder, you must do this, you must do that. That's a trauma response. As is this kind of try hard driver that a lot of people have, where they've got to achieve everything. until they burn out. They've got to keep going and going and going and go. It's almost like survival mode. It's very much a trauma response. So we need to start setting those responses down a little bit, just understanding where they come from, what's making us do that. So this is a lot about introspection. This is a lot about quite deep self-examination, again, with the help of a therapist to guide you, to look at the limiting beliefs you've got, where did they come from? And once you can actually set them down, we can then allow something really important to happen. And what happens is that the child part of you, the really scared little part of you, because our child part is always scared. It's always scared because we've neglected it. We've carried on these narratives, beating ourselves over the head. But you're beating the child part of you over the head. That's what you're doing. It's in there, and you're telling it, crack on, shut up, got to get on, got to work hard, try hard, do this, do that. So you're kind of carrying on that very negative cycle. So when we stop doing that, the child part of you, the scared little soul, that's desperate for the love and acceptance, desperate for a bit of validation and reassurance, can now start to speak to us. Because up until now, it couldn't speak to us. It's been trying to speak to us, but we've been bashing it over the head and criticizing it. And then it doesn't want to speak to us anymore. So it shuts up. And then we get ill. And then we go back to those old patterns of behavior from childhood because we're stuck. So we need to allow it to talk to us. And when we set down the criticism and we become more compassionate, the child part will come forward because it will understand that we're speaking more gently now. We're not shouting. We're hearing what it's got to say. And we're not going to bash it over the head. So rather than exiling that part of ourselves and keeping it quiet, we allow it to talk. And with that comes healing. Because when we allow it to talk and we hear it and we respond to it, we begin to heal. And those two parts of us become much more fused together. So we can then start to parent the child part of us in a more nurturing way rather than being critical. We can nurture it and we can move forward together. And this is where we really set down the patterns of behavior that haven't served us very well. We let them go because we understand, okay, that's what I did when I was a child. I don't need that now. I'm now effectively parenting my younger self. I'm in charge of this. I've got this. I know what I'm doing. I can do it much more nurturing. I don't need those old behaviors. And then we can move forward to more freedom and more positivity in our relationships. And I don't just mean your relationship with others. I mean your relationship with you. Your relationship with you will be much more positive because you've allowed the child part of you to come forward and to be heard. And that will be the thing that will enable the relationship that you have with yourself to become a much more positive one, where you can release yourself from these thoughts that you've had and these beliefs you've held. So inner child work for me is very powerful. It's really quite a complicated part of therapy that I do. I do urge you, if you are considering inner child work, to make sure your therapist is qualified to do it, because there are a lot of people masquerading at the moment as saying they can do it, and all they've done is they've done some kind of online course for about 2 or 3 hours, and they think that means they can do inner child work. They can't. It's quite unsafe if that happens, because what happens is if they open up the trauma and they can't close it off, you will feel worse, and they may not have the skills to close it down once they've opened the door. So be mindful of that when you are selecting a therapist. I will talk about options and therapy in a later podcast, but just to put that in here, if you are considering inner child work, please, please, please make sure that the person knows what they're doing. It's not an easy topic, and it can be quite emotive for the therapist as well as the client, actually. So caution is needed. But I hope that was another helpful episode for you. And it was trauma healing today, how we're going to heal trauma by talking to the inner child. And the next episode will actually be around childhood trauma. So that will be kind of linked into what we've just discussed. But it's bye for now.